So welcome tonight I'm going to be talking about what I've seen through my Akashic readings and LBL hypnosis. And I think it's important. I know that people talk about the grays and little type of, how do I put it? Little sentient beings, the classic expressions of ETs that we've heard about for decades. And I really want to talk about what is not often, I think, spoken about enough. I know that what we talk about quite often are the Pleiadians, who are Nordic. And hi, Sherry. And but I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to just go one by one. So one of my first memories, and I've talked about it in various lives, but it's been spread out over the years, that I thought I would just go line by line of memory, and then it's all encased in one video, which would be, I think, good to be able to, go back to it. Okay, so one memory of my recollection as a sentient being was it looked like a sloth, to be honest with you. It was not a humanoid in any way. And I've talked about it before, where I was on the beach in Malibu with my husband at the time and my son playing in the waves. And the sun felt so good on my skin. And I was closing my eyes, and there was a double moon and a dark, beautiful indigo sky that felt so good. And there was a lapping, calm ocean with black sand. And it was a very dark planet, but not dark in any way ominous. It was a very gentle, relaxed planet. And this went on for 15 minutes, and I realized that I was having a memory of a past life. Later on, during the COVID lockdown, I mean, this was years later. I mean, like probably about 6-7 years later. Sasha Stone did a whole expose on different sentient beings in various planets and realms, and there were the Sloths. I kid you not. And he didn't call them Sloths. They were more like, it's a different type of a name that he used, which honestly, unfortunately, his channel was taken down during the COVID lockdown censorship, and we lost that information. I can't find that the series of videos he did on energetic frequency and different sentient beings was unbelievable. I think I might actually email him and ask him if he has any of that he could upload again, because it was extraordinary. So that was the first confirmation. And this was like literally about 6 years later, when I saw that what I had seen and experienced was real. Okay, another one was of a dream. It was actually a dream where I remembered my beloved and myself on a planet where it was a polyamorous planet. It was a very primal, primitive planet, and we had red skin. And when I say red, I mean like literally lipstick red. And the men had blonde hair on their arms and legs, and we had black hair, like very shockingly black hair. You could say blue-black hair, black eyebrows that were very pronounced, heavily lashed eyes, and dark eyes, by the way, in case you were wondering. And we were just primitive, polyamorous, somewhat. There was a little rawness, a little brutality to that. So, and I knew immediately it was me and my beloved in a different incarnation on another planet and another dimensional frequency. When I did hypnosis, right before I got trained to become trained under the Michael Newton method that I preferred in hypnotherapy over Dolores Cannon, though I had read both the books of Michael Newton, PhD, and Dolores Cannon. I'd read the books, respectively, and for some reason I felt much more connected to his point of view. But anyway, so I did a hypnotherapy session, and I'm not going to go too much into all of it, but what I will say is what you're seeing on the screen right now is actually sentient humanoid beings. Exactly, they look exactly like that. What you're seeing is exactly what they look like, except they had, and I couldn't capture that, a little darker yellow skin with platinum hair and golden eyes. And what you're seeing is me replicating a scene of me and my beloved, my eternal consort, what you guys would call twin flame, on another planet. And he's meditating, and actually in the actual vision that I had, he's nude, okay? But of course I had to dress, but she's in a tunic. And he does not want to be part of the tribe. He doesn't want to be part of the tribe because he wants to learn the nature of God on his own. And it was giving him a lot of pain. So it's interesting how we have this idea that once we go in other realms and other planets, that somehow everything's going to be okay. And sure, everything is going to be okay, because in those other realms, you're not paying to live. Our planet is very, very difficult because we pay to live. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Whereas in those planets, everything is provided for. You could call it Eden if you want, Utopia if you'd like. But anyway, but what was really making him suffer was the lack of knowledge that he felt like he should have effortlessly, and he wanted to do it on his own. Now, the tribe that we lived with, we all looked the same. So it was a very, it was not a diverse planet. It was a very beautiful planet. It was like a jungle planet with Lang Lang. I'm going to call them by names you'll recognize, because I don't know what the names were. But anyway, I'm going to say Lang Lang. It smelled perfume like jasmine. What else? Orchids, tiny little orchids. It had a very exotic feel, very similar, I would say, to Hawaii and the Polynesian Islands. And it had that kind of energetic field. And we all looked alike. And I've never seen these particular sentient beings drawn or discussed ever. So again, pale yellow eyes, platinum hair, yellow skin, pale yellow skin. But I did see in the same hypnosis session that I had, I was shown as somebody who had very tall. In this case, I would say 5'10", 5'11", which for me is tall, and pale skin, freckled nose, long undulate red hair, copper red. And it came to me that it was from my original first humanoid incarnation. Well, guess what? In the book by Elena Dannon, it's called I think it's called The Galactic Races. You can look it up. But anyway, her name is Elena Dannon. And she just put out a second edition, which I haven't bought yet. So the first people that I just described, I don't know if it's in her book, but the redheaded people, yeah, they're like, what did she say? I think she said they were like 10 to 15 feet tall, and they have red hair. And when I looked at the picture, I went, oh my God, that's it. That's exactly what I saw. And the reason why it gives me chills is because it's confirmation from someone I've never met. I've never seen her being interviewed. She doesn't get interviewed that often, though she does have a YouTube channel, just so you know, and it's Elena Dannon, Danaan, to give her credit. Her books are extraordinary, especially if you're a starseed. You will find, you might actually find yourself, like some of your ancestors you've long forgotten. So that was deep for me. That was huge, because I have a long history of having what you would call imaginary friends for 3-year-old kids, 4-year-old kids. When I was like 2-3 years old, I had a woman who I thought was a relative, and she wasn't, who would come and visit me. In my mind, I thought she was visiting me. And she had red hair. She wore a boucle green suit and red lipstick. And I actually thought it was my grandmother. And as I got older, as I got to be 9, 10, 11 years old, I used to ask about this woman. and thinking she was an aunt, a relative, a sister, somebody, and no one could answer the question. Who was this woman? There was no woman they'd ever known in their entire time that we lived in this particular area in France. There was no, in fact, my mother had never known anyone with red hair. Not my grandmother, not my mother, not my uncles. They didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. So later I realized that what I had was a guide, a companion, somebody who was kind of keeping me tethered and rooted on planet Earth, because I was remembering things. I hadn't forgotten things. Like, for example, when my grandfather died, I'll never forget that. It scared the shit out of me, actually. I'm 3 years old, and I see him in silhouette sitting in the apartment just staring at me. And I'm like freaking the fuck out. I'm like, even then I knew that this was not unusual. So I had already developed a sense of, well, first I could see things that I shouldn't, in my mind, see. And realize that something was off. And I could not explain this to the adults. Again, this is the 1960s, and yeah, it's very woohoo shit, right? So that was one thing. Let me think. I had a client who came in to see me who was dealing with gender reassignment, and she had been working on this for a while, and she was thinking about doing the final cut, if you get what I'm saying. And we wanted to explore other options before she made that final decision, because it's pretty intense and it's very painful. It's not an easy surgery, and it's forever something you can never go back. So her past life was on a blue planet, again, jungle-like, but mostly blue tones. And the population of humanoids, somewhat humanoids, were a blue race, okay? Which is interesting, because when you look at the Vedics religion, and you look at Hindustani religion, you look at Shiva being blue and Krishna being blue. So it's interesting. And I remember Ruth Montgomery, when I was reading her books in the 70s, she talked about a blue race and a red race that disappeared over time, and we eventually became the dominant 5 races, if you've ever studied that. Anyway, so she lived on this planet, and it was a 50-50 gender thing. Even though they were androgynous, they could be androgynous, they could turn female, or they could turn male. So it was almost like fluidity in gender. And it was really extraordinary, because it explained how she was going through that in this incarnation. And in that other planet, in that other realm, she had gone through the same, where she could actually decide, we need to balance out the planet with more masculinity. Let me be a masculine. It was interesting. And the way she left that incarnation wasn't through death, but through literally leaving and dropping her body through a portal. Literally a portal. Let me think. I'm trying to remember another. Bear with me. Yes. So when I do Akashic readings, what I find interesting is when I also do hypnosis, when clients come to me for hypnosis sessions, whether they want to find out, what's blocking them, any trauma in this life, and how does it connect to past life, and does it, and so on, or what they basically, some of them just want to surrender to their soul's wisdom to deliver them the information they need, similarly to an Akashic journey, if you will, but for them, right? So I remember this client who had talked about in her session where she was an Andromedan on planet Earth before they had the pyramids of Giza, but they were in the process of building the pyramids of Giza, which I thought was extraordinary, because, it goes into high knowledge, which we know now that we look at the pyramids, and we can see this entire structure that's beneath the surface. that seems to be engineered by some pretty advanced civilization. So a combination of the local Egyptians and Andromedans were helping in building this, these pyramids. Let me see, what else did I have to tell you that I think? Oh yes, the other thing that I rarely hear, which bothers me actually, it bothers me a lot, is that in multiple Akashic readings, I have seen sentient beings who had jet black skin. I never hear this. I always hear about the Nordics and the Nordics and the Nordics, but I never hear about these races of people, and there are multiple types of sentient beings that are definitely humanoid that have this jet black skin. One of them, one particular group, tribe, it's like matte, flat black, and they have these large, luminous eyes, and they are loving, gentle people. One was genocided through some means, and I can go into it if you want me to. And the other one really was extraordinary. I felt like it was in the seventh dimension, seventh dimension, on a planet that was crystalline. The structures were exactly what you would imagine, columns and light and crystal and water, and the sky was like a sherbet of pinks and blues and pale yellows and oranges, like a sherbet color. Just beautiful, mystical, magical sky. And I was witnessing a bonding ceremony. I'm going to call it a bonding ceremony because I wouldn't call it a marriage ceremony. So they were bonding. And the planet was very diverse in its population of sentient humanoids. But anyway, they were in that beautiful matte black skin with these luminous, large luminous eyes that glimmered sapphire. And when the bonding ceremony ended, I saw them have a life together. And they lived hundreds of years. And then I saw them deciding that it was time to go. It was time to have other experiences together. They were eternal consorts. And I saw the man, the masculine, go through a portal first. And then she followed him right after, like literally right behind him. And that's how they lowered themselves to a lower dimension to start experiencing other realities and other understandings of themselves. And I think it's important because what I find in the New Age community, and it's really important, I don't like, and you're not going to like me for saying it, but I'm going to say it. I don't like the subtle racism that I see sometimes. And I'll explain to you what happened and why I believe in this and why I feel like we need to stop this bullshit because it's really harming us. I remember watching a book reading. I was actually a witness to a book reading at Alexandria 2 in Pasadena, California in around 1994. And it was in the basement. This is when they had the bigger bookstore and they had a beautiful basement where it could seat like 40 people. And somebody was talking about, there was a guest who had written a book on how she was a walk-in. And if you want to ask me about walk-ins, I can give you details on how that works and why that works and who experiences that. But anyway, she was a reptilian who had crashed her craft in something like Arizona, Utah, something like that. And she was hurt. She was dying. And I think it was a series of military, somebody that surrounded the crash site. And she actually dropped her body and stepped into someone else's body. That was her first incarnation as a human. And so everyone was believing in that, right? Everyone was nodding their head. That was good to see, actually. Remember, it's 1994. But then she said that she remembered first going through the death tunnel. And in the death tunnel were, obviously white angels and they were black angels. And I remember looking at the crowd and people were literally shaking their head at the idea that there would not be, like they couldn't wrap their head around the fact that there could be black angels. And I thought, it really shook me, to be honest. It shook me because I don't understand how you can be spiritual and still retain racist ideologies. It doesn't compute to me at all. It's kind of like people who are Christian who are racist, but Jesus was Semitic, meaning he's got Semitic, aka Jewish, aka Arabic, you understand? Meaning olive skin, darker eyes, dark hair, Anyway, certainly not Nordic. And I have nothing against Nordic people at all because I've had past lives as a Viking myself, as a Viking, as a woman in Holland and things of that nature. So it's not coming from them. It's coming from the fact that as humans, we have to stop thinking that we have not been other races. And I talk about it in my lives constantly, how, if you're a black woman in this incarnation, you were a Chinese woman or a Chinese man in a past incarnation, or Japanese or whatever, right? And vice versa. You know what I mean? And it's the weirdest thing. It's like when you have a connection with a culture, it's a homesickness. It's a remembrance of a past life that you had that feels familiar to you, and you cherish that energy. But people limit themselves on these memories because they feel like it's impossible. So if you're Hispanic and you're very proud of your culture and you're very proud of who you are, your food, your culture, your music, whatever, right? And then suddenly you have a past life as a Japanese woman or man. Why is it so difficult to wrap your head around that? And it's not going to bring you to the ascension levels that you need to be if you can't fluidly realize that not only did you incarnate in various cultures and colors, but also sexual desires, that you were gay, that you were straight, that you were bisexual, and on and on and on. And this is extremely important because that should be rudimentary 101 understanding of the soul's nomadic journeys through experiences. So now let me go back to some of the things I remember. One of the hypnosis sessions that I had with a client is she was an avian. And we're talking about blue feathers, a kind of like a humanoid / bird-like features, kind of like Horus. When they draw Horus in a more like a mixture of a human and a bird, that kind of thing, a bird of prey in this case. And what I loved about her is that she didn't hesitate to surrender to the experience of what her soul was revealing to her in that past life as an avian. And what was the point of that incarnation? The point is that she was in the 7th dimension. And again, no hive mentality, no hive concept of, like hive consciousness. Everyone was individual. But there was a sense of balance and peace and abundance. And she loved to fly, and she did. And she was extremely large in size, probably like, 7 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot, that kind of thing. And they lived in something that would look like tree houses. It was structures of that kind. And there was a sense of happiness, a sense of contentment, a sense of peace. Let me see, what else can I tell you? I'm doing it off the top of my head because I thought it was important to kind of go through that. Various memories. I've never actually seen a Lyran, so far in my Akashic readings. But I know, like, for example, my husband, if you ever saw his face, he had the face of a Lyran, which is interesting. And so very humanoid, obviously, but this feline energy across the plane of the cheekbones and the sweep of the nose, and this kind of like, the best way I can describe it is a Marlon Brando forehead which is a heavier forehead that you'll see in some Native American tribes, and these deep set eyes that are just luminous and magical, green, gold eyes. He definitely had the face of a lion, and he was definitely connected to Pleiades. I mean, he remembered, I've mentioned it many, many times before, as a 10-year-old boy in 1972, he remembered and often talked about how he came from the planets of the Pleiades. And so coming here, imagine being 10 years old in 1972 in Haight-Ashbury, right, San Francisco, in a timeline where everyone's either high or everyone's burning their bras, and it's free sex and love, and there's a small group of people talking about UFOs, Area 51, things of that nature, but no one's really talking about the fact that, we are the disclosure statement that we're waiting for. And so, sorry, I need to get my cat out so he could go out. But my point to you is, imagine the pain of growing up as a teenage boy and knowing that you don't belong here, knowing that something's off, knowing that you come from another planet, and you remember it very strongly, and you feel so alone. And so, again, I'm going to say the same message I said earlier in the last 2 lives that I've done, is when you bemoan the fact that you're just now remembering who you are as a starseed, just realize that there were people living that reality of remembering from the time they were born. And it was very lonely, very difficult. It damn near destroyed people's souls. So be happy that for some reason your soul contract was to remember now, not when you were born. There's always mercy in action, and that's what it is, grace in action. What he remembered were past lives in the ancient world of this planet. Besides the Pleiadian that he kept insisting that this is where I come from, this is where I belong. And he was very much into flying and stargazing, and he knew the planets, he knew he knew all about it. He was fascinated by Egypt, and he was fascinated by everything that dealt with flying, which I thought was interesting. He loved his favorite movies were the Star Wars series, because it made him feel like he was back doing what he loved most, which was flying those jets in Star Wars, the galactic battles. And if you talk to any starseed that actually remembers themselves, you'll find that I know a lot of Andromedans, believe it or not, and they remember the genocide of their people. And they remember being on huge motherships and having an entire society of their civilization surviving on these motherships and trying to find a new home, which is unbelievable, in terms of the grief and the sense of not being tethered and rooted and grounded, if you can imagine. Let me see. I'm trying to remember what else. There's so much. One client was in a hypno session with me, and she remembered being on a water planet. Now, let me just say that I know for a fact that this client had never read about Mintaka, which is a water planet. It's a beautiful planet, but it's completely covered in water. And she talked about, as she was under with me, in her hypnosis session, she talked about how she was a mermaid. That's how she described it. And they lived underwater, and they had whole cities underwater, and how happy they were and how free they felt. And she was like really reliving these incredible, beautiful moments that she didn't realize she had missed. And turns out that if you buy the Starseed Oracle deck by Rebecca Campbell, illustrated by Daniel Noel, Mintaka is mentioned as a watery planet. I remember hearing of Julie Aubière, who is into human design, was a psychic, was very much, she lived in Costa Rica, was very much into, I guess, the New Age, the fractured New Age community in Costa Rica. Just so you know, she returned to France and within like 6 months became a Catholic, a devout Catholic. So she kind of flipped. She did a 180. And but I remember her hypnosis session with an American in Costa Rica, where she was on a watery tropical type of planet, and she's on a space. She's on like a small individual space capsule. In fact, all the children are kind of very much like, remember Superman when his father puts him in that capsule because the planet's about to blow, and he propels him out into space. Hopefully he'll land. I think he knows the coordinates are to Earth. I don't remember if he actually punched in the coordinates. I forgot, but I know you remember that. So it was similar to that, but it was like tons and tons of capsules being released from. I love it. TikTok just gave me a visibility of 10 minutes. That means I'm on the shit show because I'm talking about, the genos of other galactic races. But anyway, so in this hypnosis, which she deleted, which I wish I had the forethought to download, you can hear her crying, sobbing, because she's seeing, excuse me, she's a child, and the capsule is being propelled, and she can see, excuse me, that she can see it blowing up, and she's thinking of the amphibians, the sentient beings that are being lost, and she's sobbing. You can't make that shit up in hypnosis. You cannot. Excuse me. But anyway, that session that she had with this hypnotherapist was very powerful. And the grief, she was inconsolable. Inconsolable. It's because in the hypnosis, in her session, she was feeling it and she was reliving every moment. And this is important because when somebody goes under, no one's that creative. Number one, no one can be that creative that fast at the speed of light in talking about that. Most people who lie to that level of creativity are going to need to pause. But she was expressing this incredible planet that was no more. And what's interesting about what happened to her after this experience and doing probably too much fucking plant medicine in Costa Rica, that's the problem. People do too much shit. And eventually it rubber bands you back to orthodoxy and dogma, to be honest. Because she didn't go back as a Catholic, a progressive Catholic, somebody who was looking for the truth in this and that. She went back to the old dogma, I kid you not. And I still follow her. I still have respect for her work as a human design specialist, but that's about it. Everything she had incurred, she destroyed. All her work that was out there for you and I to learn from, gone, taken down by her own hands. So why is this happening? Well, I think it's because these experiences are so huge that unless you have a good support system that isn't in La La Land. See, the problem is in the New Age community, there's way too many people that are just fucked up. I mean, it's no different than people who are in the Christian religion, Jewish religion, and Muslim religion, Buddhist religion, spiritual, Wiccan religion, whatever. You've got a lot of fucked up people. So the problem is that as you go through these great levels of awakening, you need a support system to tell you when you're having psychosis and to tell you when you're having real fucking experiences, so you're not going down into weird realms that end up scaring the shit out of you, because you don't know, if, especially if you're having a psychotic period, you know, and no one's like helping you to get out of it, and you don't know what to do, so you go back to what you know, which is whatever religion that you've decided is going to give you the solace you want, because at least it's not going into the etheric. Do you understand? It's grounded in dogmatic belief system that have been going on for 2,000 years, 3,000 years, and you don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is be a good little lamb and follow the program, and you're good to go. What we're doing as starseeds, as we're remembering ourselves, as we're remembering that we are the disclosure state, you know, we are the disclosure, we are the ETs. We are. And we've come back time and time again into these incredible human bodies on this planet to experience something that we thought was going to be temporary. Because I don't know if I told you, but when I do the Akashic readings for clients all over the world, by the way, all over the world, and I ask, why did they fall? Meaning, how did we forget? What happened to create this incredible lobotomy of ourselves? Like, what happened? What did we do? Where we went through the machine again and again and completely were stripped of our power and our memory of our true self. And so with every person I've ever done these readings for, the answer is different. It's not that we fell when Atlantis went through the Great Deluge. We didn't all fall at that moment at all. In fact, some of us fell way, way later after that. And I've talked about it here and there. But this concept that Atlantis was the linchpin of us going and collapsing into 3D was a lie. It was another dogmatic, quasi-religious, if you will, belief system that from Atlantis we fell and that was it. That's not what happened. I had one young client who was 22, and when I did his Akashic reading, he didn't fall at all. He decided to go in, to dive in. And I asked him, because I reported back everything I'd seen, this, that, and the other. And I asked him, usually I ask people, what is the most important life that I've shared with you? And they'll tell me which one and why. And then we go back and forth to more or less make sense of it all, so that they're not just cut loose into the world with all this information without a sense of being grounded and a sense of understanding why their soul and their guides, the Akashic Masters, would want them to know these incarnations as opposed to something else, right? So in his case, he said to me, "Oh, I knew." I said, "What?" "Oh yeah, I knew I'd forget." "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, I've always known that I volunteered, and I've always known that that would be the price I'd have to pay. That I'd forget who I was, that it would go on for hundreds and thousands of years, and then eventually I would go back up into knowledge and self-remembrance." 22 years old. And that blew me away. Because some people fell because they did weird shit. They did things that they thought was temporary. Oh, I'm just going to be a walk-in. I'm just going to experience being a human. Without them understanding that the minute they stepped out of their how do I put it? Their avatar body that had higher frequency consciousness, that the minute they did a walk-in situation in a human body that was in between 3D and 4D, that they would start forgetting. They would immediately start forgetting who they were. Remember the scene in Dreams where what dreams may come, when Robin Williams goes to hell to get his wife who took her life? Do you remember that scene? Where if he stays a little longer, too long, he's going to forget himself. He's going to actually forget everything. Do you remember that? Well, that's what happened to us. With every incarnation, more and more, we forgot who we were. We forgot our original power, our original self, our original capacity for love and co-creation. We forgot we were architects of realities. We forgot telepathy. We forgot remote viewing. We forgot our integrity in using these powers with civility and with love. Not for avarice. And so, if you've never seen What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, I highly recommend you watch that movie, because that scene alone is important for you to understand how we fell into 3D and how we forgot and got sucked into the loosh. So I think it's interesting. I mean, one of the things you can ask your soul, and this is one of the guided meditations that I have on YouTube. It's called a Soul Retrieval Guided Meditation. And soul retrieval guided meditation is done for different things. It's actually done to retrieve fragments of your soul that you left behind on battlefields and traumatic endings throughout this planet, and obviously other planets. But in this case, you can actually use this 10-minute meditation to ask your soul and to give your soul permission to reveal which starseed past life you need to remember. Many people I hear say, I'm Lyran, I'm Pleiadian, I'm Arcturian, I'm what is it, Siren? What is, I forgot. I'm like brain dead right now. But and so forth, right? But they don't remember actual experiences for the most part. So if you know, for example, that you were whatever you were, right? Or if all you remember, okay, is what you look like, and that's all you remember is what you look like, and you've never seen any other UFO specialists or starseed quote unquote specialists that revealed that, say, sentient being, be it a type of reptilian, a type of gray, insectoid, whatever, right? Or even other species. Like, for example, one of the things that was discussed in the 70s, it was really big about Atlantis falling, was the cloning of and the mixing, the intermingling of cyclops and centaurs and mermaids and mermans and what else? Hang on. Fawns. In other words, there was the mixture. This was when people could do with animals, and there was no problem with fertility and issue of progeny from those weird situations. So one of the problems that was happening with Atlantis is they were doing a lot of weird ass shit with mixing, like for example what's happening in Japan, where they've mixed pig genes, DNA, with human DNA to, oh, guess what, we have an organ for you, we have a kidney, we have a heart. But what they don't understand is that souls travel to experience itself in various avatars, various vessels. So there's a problem. I hope you see that. And Atlantis did the exact same thing. We're seeing some replication of the arrogance and the fuckery of science trying to control and be like God when they have no wisdom. I'm not one of these people that blames God for a death, a war, a disease. Just so you know, in case you were going to say, well, God's fucking up. I would say to you, no, actually, God gave us free will. We're the ones fucking up with that free will. And if you're a good parent, you don't force your kids to love you. And you don't force them to do things that you want them to do. You let them become themselves. You let them experience themselves if you're a good parent. So I guess most people aren't going to relate to that because most people aren't very good parents. But when you are a good parent, you have the patience of infinity. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are playing funny business with DNA, and I know they know better. I know they know that it's fundamentally wrong to do what they're doing, because we know, and we have remote viewers in the governments. We have remote, what do you think remote viewers do besides spying on other governments? Remote viewers have been asked to see the past, to see our origins, to see the future. And they must have come back from the future showing them that the oligarchs aren't going to continue with this slaughtering rule that's been going on for thousands of years. The way they slaughter people, and they've normalized it to a point where it's like a shrug of the shoulders and let's move on. Let's buy real estate. Let's make more money. But let's go back to starseeds, because when we went as starseeds in various planets that were annihilated, and that we witnessed, or we were part of being annihilated in those planets when our souls erupted out of our bodies violently without us really being aware of what ultimately was going on, right? These traumas you carry. So when you do a soul retrieval guided meditation, and you give your soul permission to show you what you need to know, right? Trust that your soul is going to only reveal what you're ready to see. Your soul is never there to harm you. It doesn't want to harm you. It wants to have you grow up. It wants you to hack out of the limitations of your monkey brain in this avatar suit, so that the more you know, the more fearless you become, and you realize the truth of your immortality, so that you are no longer being programmed to believe that this reality is the only reality that is real. Remember, there is no spoon. So that's why many of us were born to remember. And we were given the task of remembering our own, incarnations on other planets as different sentient beings to share. I remember doing a hypnotherapy session with a client who's come back into my life recently. Again, a client that is a teacher in Costa Rica. And I remember one of the questions you ask, because to me it's very important to see, what did you look like then? Well, I don't care if you're a pirate, a nun, a fisherman, or an Andromedan. I want to know, what did you look like? So I typically say, listen, I want you to look at your feet. Tell me what you see. Look at your hands. What do you see? And I saw her pause, and she was hesitating, because I knew that when I said, well, what do you see? Tell me what you see. Like, look at your hands. What do you see? I knew she didn't see 5 fingers. I knew she did not see 5 fingers at all. She paused, trying to question what was being shown to her. And she was trying to place it in the right box. But what it turned out after the session, I asked her, so tell me, how many fingers did you see? Because I knew she'd lied when she said 5, because I just knew. You get to a point where you just know. You read between the lines, you read in the silence, you read in the words and the sighs and so forth, and the pauses. And she said, I saw 3 fingers. I said, I know. And she goes, how do you know? Because the way you paused, I knew that it wasn't calculating 5. You weren't seeing that. And she had orange skin, and what she would look at like leopard spots. It looked like leopard spots, except it wasn't furry. It was skin with 3 fingers on each hand. And because she wasn't used to, and she wasn't prepared to see all of that, she couldn't see all of what she was and all of what she experienced on that planet, looking like not like a human. So when you decide to do well, I mean, I usually tell clients before you do hypnosis with me, the best thing for you to do is an Akashic. And the reason why I talk about Akashic so much is because it's not in your hands. It's in the hands of the Akashic Record Masters. It's in the hands of your soul contract, your soul, my team, your team. And we get to present stuff to you that you are ready for. But you can't play small once you get the information. Meaning, once you get the information that you did X, Y, and Z, how are you going to play small? And do people like back away and decide, no, that's, wow, that's a lot? Habits are hard to break. Good ones and bad ones. And if the habit of self-destruction is a habit that you cling to, which honestly, don't beat yourself up. Most human beings, all of us have a problem. We all have a demon we're wrestling to master within ourselves, But what I'll say is that once you get the information from an Akashic reading that's recorded, that you can listen to again and again and again, there's no going back. Unless you really, really don't want to win in the evolution and mastery of yourself. And so what I found for me personally as an Akashic reader, starseed, is the clients that come to me are starseeds and they're ready to remember. They're just ready. And I found that other people have done Akashic reading with other Akashic readers, and they're not talking starseed, which I find it strange. Because if you're on this path and you're really serious about self-mastery, and you've made a pact to yourself that you're never coming back in 3D, you're probably 99% a starseed. You're not doing this shit anymore. And you've done these paths of ignorance, you, me, and others like us, again and again, being completely oblivious of who we truly are for centuries, at the behest of the various faces of the oligarchs, from the churches to the kings to the emperors and conquerors and so forth. You know what I'm saying? And we will not do it again. And we remember what it was like not to pay to live. We know what that was like. Deep in our soul, we know something's wrong. And yet we're surrounded by people accepting a system that we know can't possibly work. And what's interesting is, again, I keep talking about this because it's important to repeat it. The newer generation that are born have avatars that are much stronger in the 21st century than the avatars that we were settled with in the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century. And I again use the example of an iPhone 4 as opposed to an iPhone 16. Right? There's certain software that the iPhone 4, unless it's upgraded, in the hard drive is, upgraded, the chassis and the outside looks the same, it's a retro phone, but the inside is completely fucking overhauled. There's no other way for software to download on an iPhone 4 in its original capacity. It's impossible. And you know that, and I know that. So the people that are born in the last 35 years have an upgraded hardware system. The junk DNA has already been activated. Not all of it, obviously, but a lot of it is being activated already. Because we live in pockets around the world in environments of 4D consciousness. We're toggling between our mortal eyes, unfortunately, looking at the 3D of this reality, with the 4D consciousness of the knowing and the remembering, with the 5D aspirations and the remembering of what it was like and what it will be again on this planet. And so that's what we are walking towards. This is why I'm sharing with you various, kind of stories about this, the Akashic Records and our starseeds. And that's why I have a group called Starseeds Awakening. And that's why I've been sitting on writing a book on Starseeds Awakening and how we fell and how this, it's like, it was like one thing after another. It wasn't just like an Andromedan going, I think I want to be a human being. I am just going to take on this body. The guy doesn't want to live anymore. It's time for him to go away. So I'm just going to take over the body for, I don't know, a lifetime or maybe just a couple years. And before they know it, they've crashed into amnesia. I saw that with a client. And then the amnesia cycles the loosh. So now you're in the loosh, right? Meaning the reincarnation wheel, the trap, which is a conveyor belt, if you will. And then before you know, you've got trauma in a battlefield or childbirth or God knows what. I'm not going to go into it. But it was brutal in some parts of the world. Living was brutal. Dying was brutal. And so that creates some scars of pain and trauma, resentment, regret, grief, loss, abandonment, betray, so boom, you go back into the loosh. This time I'll remember it. This time I'll do better. This time I won't leave you. This time I will love you. This time we will win the war. That kind of thing. And of course it fails again because now you're being betrayed. Just think of William Wallace in Braveheart, the movie. Remember the king, the Scottish king? He's trying to make the guy be a man. And he gets betrayed. William Wallace is betrayed. And imagine the loosh that would bring him back because he lost his wife. She was kidnapped. She was, what happened to her. If you remember that story, just put it all together and go, and so what would make a person come back again and again? To right the wrongs. To free Scotland, to make sure that this time I will have my wife and we will have children in this incarnation. This time it will work. And then it happens and it's World War I. So do you see the patterns? Do you see how you can get deeper and deeper into the hole of amnesia to incarnate again and again and again to no fault of your own in the end? And so what's happening is that we are in the most fortunate time. By the way, blood moon is going to roll in. Excuse me. Is going to roll in at around, depending on where you live, look for your timeline. But put your clock on because I've got my clock on for 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, thereabouts, to see the rising of the blood moon, which is a portal to, and what do I want to call in? I want to call in 5D New Earth. I'm not calling in for anything else but 5D New Earth. Because all my problems, all my generational problems are gone once I'm in 5D. Obviously. And trust me when I tell you that some very intelligent, highly educated PhDs that I talk to on a regular basis, we are all working out the whys of why we're still in 3D, why this is still happening, why are we still witnessing what we're witnessing, what is really the end goal to this, what is the Galactic Council doing, the Venusian elders, what are they saying, what do they want us to do? And we've talked about it at length, but one of the things I'll bring up again is that my friend Andromeda Flame both had individual meetings with the Galactic Council in deep meditations. I mean, ceremoniously calling the four corners and below, above and below, to make sure that the downloads were not corrupted by bullshit and nefarious forces. So we could have a really clear meeting, right? And in both cases, separately from each other. The answer they gave us every time we've helped you, we helped you for 25 years, one generation, right thereabouts. And the machine came back and play. And every time we helped you, you weren't as far along as you are now as a people. Many of the great awakening of Satya Yuga, the golden age, right, where we were walking out of Kali Yuga, and look at the Kali Yuga is the age of blood and iron. You're seeing the shit show, and you're watching it as we speak. But it is the last evil. It is all of it going all at once. The great implosion of evil and avarice, right? And deviancy. And moving into Satya Yuga. And Satya Yuga is the golden age because all of us are getting, it literally means being an awakened state that creates a golden age of milk and honey, if you will, to give it, a metaphoric term. And so that's where what we're actually working on. And so the Galactic Council said, if we help you, well, we can help you again, but you will be back in the machine. What needs to happen is a complete evolution of a majority of the humans on this planet. And it has to be locked and loaded into massive empathy and the desire for abundance for all, not for one, not from I'm just going to take care of my family. This is not my business. What's happening in another country, another continent, another state, another city, another whatever, doesn't matter to me. And we've evolved where we're saying at greater numbers, this matters to me. What happens to someone I'll never meet matters to me. And that was the clincher to move us out of this very selfish, toxic, I take care of my own and no one else. Disloyalty for the self and no one else. For centuries, by the way. Into us getting to this collective belief that every sentient being deserves fucking peace and abundance. And that was the big deal. And now we have to move out of the orthodoxy of these dense, clunky religions. And I was talking to Andromeda saying, I almost feel like we need to be on a 28-day cycle. Move away from the Gregorian calendar and go into a 13-month calendar, which is appropriate, to get us in a true cycle of consciousness because of habits of creating new habits. And I said to her that I feel as if there's certain steps we have to take so that we breach out of these portals of density into the higher density that are more in match with something that was taken away from it. Again, we were talking about the removal of bells, and we all know that frequency sound is incredibly powerful. It can harm, it can heal. We know this, right? And so there was this understanding that as we move into building communities, I did a whole live on beware of cults. Cults are fucking easy to develop. And I'm actually seeing a lot of cults. Moji's a cult. He's a fucking cult. Osho was a cult. And it was. There's no denying it. It wasn't just Jim Jones and Don't Drink the Kool-Aid cult. It was all kinds of cults going on in the 60s and 70s. And went into the 80s. And all religions created cults, let's be honest. So there's something about human beings who need to follow, but they follow blindly into the weirdest fucking realms of consciousness. And so one of the things we have to be aware is how to discern the difference between communities that are loving, the round table type of respecting of all sentient beings, like an Ubuntu energy. Ubuntu meaning, if you're not comfortable, I'm not comfortable. I want you to be comfortable. And this is not about a hive mentality. It's an individual empathy. And what did Elon Musk talk about? He said, Empathy is the destruction of the Western world. Well, bingo. Is it? So the reason why they're not going to help us, and it's not that they're not going to help us. They're going to give us the downloads to be empowered to know what to do. Because this time, if we push the machine will never come back. It's funny, this is like literally 40 minutes of my visibility on TikTok being stopped. I don't know, you don't know this, but I'm seeing a flag of your visibility will be blah, blah, blah for 10 minutes. That means that my live, no one knows I'm on a live right now. So this has been going on, it's been 40 minutes of it. And I'm not even sure how long I've been on. But anyway, so my point to you is that you need to understand that all of us are fractals of Yeshua, fractals of other light beings that walked on this planet trying to teach another way. Before him, there was Buddha. Before him, who was before him? Shiva? Krishna? Before that, Radha? Sita? Who else? What before that? During Atlantis, who was the avatars? Who were the great sages that we don't even know? Who tried to warn us that Atlantis was going to fall, probably hundreds of years before it fell, right? So if we keep our eyes and our hearts focused on pure downloads, we will be divinely directed to do such a massive shift on this planet, pushing it into 5D, that we don't have to worry about the machine anymore. And this creates a domino effect across the realms, the galaxy, this galaxy. In addition, there's a movie by Luc Besson. Luc Besson made the movie The Fifth Element. I don't know if you ever watched this with Bruce Willis. It's called The Fifth Element. With Mila Jovovich, or whatever her last name is, I can't pronounce it. But he did another movie called something like Valerian and the Thousand Planets. It's very campy. It's very Pulp Fiction, comic book, boom, bam, boom, like, Robin Hood and Batman type of shit. But it's really, really, really fucking good, actually. Because it's about sentient beings who live in a tropical planet. They have amazing abundance. They don't pay to live. But by the way, that's the norm. Just so you know, we're one of the few. I think we're probably the only planet. I mean, you could always say, well, Tony, you must be wrong, because maybe it's like the Wrinkle in Time where you have like homogenized little townships and shit like that. But I could say, okay, yeah. But for the most part, from what I've seen, besides the arid planet I mentioned before, which I forgot to, I should bring that up because it's important. No one pays to live. That's not how it works at all. But in the movie, look up director Luc Besson and watch his latest movie on, it's called again, Valerian and the Thousand Planets. Check it out. Because their planet is destroyed and all they have is a pearl, one pearl. And they are without a home. They're nomadic like the Andromedans have been. And they're trying to figure out how to live, and they become streetwise. That's what's interesting about that particular movie. Because there was a naivete, an innocence about this group of sentient beings. And because their whole planet is, destroyed, completely destroyed, they live in the world of the galactic worlds. And they start realizing, and they start waking up, and they become streetwise. And this is, I'm going to tell you how it ends, but I want you to watch it because this is for, learning. They're able to recover the pearl somehow. I'm not going to tell you how. And with that pearl, they're able to actually create their planet back. What was destroyed, what was thought impossible to build and bring back, is brought back. And so, if we are the architects of reality, and if we were if they were correct, and we are in the image of God, it doesn't mean we're the image of God as humanoids. It means we are the image of God as sentient, multidimensional, light beings who are architects of realities. If you read the books by Michael Newton, PhD, he talks about us when we die, disembodied, taking on etheric bodies, our favorite whatever costumes we like, be it masculine, feminine, whatever. And how we actually work on creating plants, animalistic species, and how we help with, adding vegetation, flora, fauna, life form on other planets. This man, Michael Newton, was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. He didn't believe in any of this. His hypnotherapy in Grass Valley, California was, oh, you're fat. Well, let's find out what happened to you when why did you, gain all this weight? Oh, you smoke. You're an alcoholic. You're an addict. Whatever. That was his thing. And he fell into this kind of work of going back into past lives, back into lives between lives. And lives between lives means, which is what I've been trained on and training still, is when you remember before you after your last incarnation, before you took this incarnation. You see? So do you see how advanced? I mean, it's not really complicated, everything I've told you. It's not complicated at all. But you see how advanced you have to be and willing to realize that the more you know, the less you know, and to realize that the only thing that's going to make you run back into your dogmatic religious belief is your fear. And if you come back into center of yourself as a nomadic spirit of infinite means, then you don't have to worry about it. The truth of the truths of all ages will come to you, and you don't have to worry about becoming having a nervous breakdown or having psychotic episodes or sounding crazy or any of that shit, because in a sense, when you're talking to your basic muggles, as we call them muggles, it's kind of like A Wrinkle in Time. If you ever read that book, if you've never read that book, I highly recommend it. I read that book to my son when he was 8 years old. A Wrinkle in Time. So let me go back to the homogenized planets that we do have, where you don't, pay to play, but it's arid. It's an arid, and I mentioned it before, it's a desert of snow or a desert of sand. There's no vegetation. People live underground, and they're not people, they're sentient beings that live in clusters. I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to put it all under one video. And there's no love. The act of kissing, the act of love, the act of touch, of skin, the 6 senses, right, that we have. The pleasure of making love to your beloved, all of these things, right? Food, wine, smoking, whatever and you know what I mean by smoking. The sensuality of your skin to the sun, to the wind, to the sand, to the ocean, to whatever, right? is something that I have not seen in some of those other various arid planets. But I've seen touches of that. I've seen it on higher realms where there's play and sound frequency, and the lovemaking is beyond compare. I mean, we're like primates compared to what we've experienced before in other realms. The way we enjoy the sensuality of life, and how we sexualize it with mindfulness, with tantric mindfulness in the higher realms. And the architecture, the beauty of the architecture. From tree houses, exactly like you saw in Avatar, to crystalline buildings, to wide sweeping porches and views, without people on your ass, other sentient beings on your ass. Literally, there's space, there's oceans, and there's realms that you can create that remind you of here. If you read his books, again, Destiny of Souls, Journey of Souls by Michael Newton, you'll see literally you being able to visit some of your favorite places, be it Yosemite, be it the Pyrenees in Spain, be it whatever. So we have had a very hard 13,000 years in our incarnations here. And it's weird how we drop our bodies and remember ourselves. And I'm wondering, because, I'm remembering some of the past hypnotherapists. Brian Weiss, just so you know, Brian Weiss is another PhD, but he's a psychiatrist. Did you know that? Who believes in hypnosis. Who wrote the book Many Lives, Many Masters, and he wrote the book Only Love is Real, which is, my beloved gave me that book, announcing to me that we were soulmates. At the time, that's the term we used. This was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, thereabouts. My point to you is that you have highly educated people that understand this. And you have people who control the machine, who are part of the machine, who also understand this. And so my question to your basic plebs, the cattle of humanity, who cling to their religious dogma, who are laughed at by the, what some people would call elite, which I call parasites. Laugh at us clinging to these old, controlled religions when we are so much more than this. We are so much more than all of this. And they're afraid of all of us remembering. They're afraid of our numbers being greater than theirs at some point. Because let me just say, in all of our incarnations, we weren't always on the same page. And that was our Achilles heel. That's why we were being so well controlled. And they were able to shame us, to turn each other in witch hunts and things of that nature. And for the first time in recorded human history on this planet, we're able to get this shit together once and for all. And they know it. And they're hoping that you won't know it. They're wanting another fucking 100-year cycle. And they're not going to get it. Do you understand? It was 1926, and here we are, 2026. It's the last cycle of bullshit. And that's why it's important to remember yourself. That's why it's important to do an Akashic record reading with someone who actually understands the starseed journey and the story, because you don't need to know you were a pirate in the 17th century. You really fucking don't. You don't really need, what you need to know is how you fell, how you forgot yourself, and what you were all about. You understand? In the 1880s, in the 1980s, if you went to a psychic who told you, oh yeah, you know, you were Marie Antoinette's best friend. Oh, you know, you were in Egypt and, you know, oh yeah, you were high priestess in Egypt. Yeah, no, that's important. That's good. But it's not as important as you knowing that you're the ET you've been looking for. You've been looking in the sky all this time. Here we go again with the 10-minute visibility restriction. And here you are. Here you are. You are your own ancestor. And you have had many incarnations in the stars, in other universes. And once you really know this in your heart of hearts, when you really, no one can take that from you, and you stand in power, in sober, mindful state of consciousness, you're unstoppable. You can't be harmed. And you'll never feel crazy. I don't feel crazy. I never feel crazy. But you know what people tell me all the time when they first meet me for sessions? I think I'm going crazy. First line out of their mouth, I think I'm going crazy. Be it about twin flames, be it about telepathy, astral traveling, lucid dreaming, synchronicities they can't explain. And they're surrounded by people who are muggles, who are 3D, densely into 3D, refuse to wake up. Refuse. And they will grab you by the ankles and take you all the way down into the very bowels of ignorance with them, if you let them. So you have to be fearless. Let me read any. Oh, thank you. I did it today. The image is a memory of a past life I had with my beloved. And that's exactly what we look like as sentient beings from another planet, realm. It's exactly how we look like. I mean, we were yellower, to be honest. More yellow. The hair more platinum, more glimmering, more... But that was the scene. Yeah, I'm walking up towards him. I'm asking him when he can join us. And he wants to figure himself out, spiritually connect with God and kind of find himself alone. And yet he's in so much pain, you know, because he's alone. And anyway, when I write my book on some of my experiences with him, and that will definitely be mentioned, because maybe the book that Elena Donin said, the second book on the galactic races, will actually show this race. If it shows this race, I'm gonna fucking cartwheel, because that will be extraordinary. But I can tell you that there are races that you will never. We always talk about the grays and the various grays and this gray, and I've seen that gray and this gray. Who gives a fuck about grays? I don't give a shit about grays. What I care about is what we were, what we experienced. I don't care about some, and again, you may actually remember yourself as a gray, believe it or not. And this idea that grays are us coming back from the future because of this, that, and the other. Time isn't linear. And the Akashic Records, when we have a crossroad moment in our personal life, we have 100 pathways to every crossroad moment in the Akashic Records. That means that those grays, if people are literally trying to sell us that that's our future gone wrong, and we're bald and short now, and we've got gray skin because we fucked up, like, you know, fucking 3,000 years from now or whatever, I call bullshit. I call fear factor bullshit. I call psyop. I call remote control. Because I know for a fact that none of these futures are certain. except there's one that's certain. Satya Yuga comes into play, and the oligarchs are no longer in control. That one is certain. We have everything we need to accomplish and to show up to the meeting to sign the new soul contracts in 5D. And I've given all kinds of there's a guided meditation on new soul contract with God, with Earth. I did that 2 years ago. It's almost like, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Somewhere in Time, but you know what gets him back into the 1970s? I read that book like 10, 20 times. I never wanted that book to end. Somewhere in Time. It was a movie with what was his name? Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour. But in Somewhere in Time, he's done everything he can. He's taken everything that reminds him of his 1970s timeline. Do you understand? He stripped his hotel room so it looks like nothing that would remind him that it's the 20th century. Because he's trying to go back to the 19th century. And in a sense, this is why the machine brought us a 12-month calendar when it's supposed to be 13. And there are two things that happen when they did that. It cut us away from the divine feminine in her 28-day cycle with the moon cycle. That was fuckery right there. And I really want to get my hands on the Ethiopian Bible. And I need to figure out which is the best version of that Bible. Very similar to the Christian Bible. There are various versions, right? Well, similarly, I want to get the right version. So I got to do some research. Because they live in a different timeline. The Chinese just celebrated New Year's in February. I forgot the actual dates. Apologize for that. But they just celebrated Kung He Fat Choi. Westerners, European Westerners, are coming to the realization that why in the fuck are we celebrating in January New Year's when it should be in April? Spring. Everything's dead in January. But why not? Why aren't we celebrating a new year in April? Spring solstice. Why not? So you got to understand, who were these men who threw away the wisdoms of the balance of the feminine and masculine to create a toxic patriarchy and toxic matriarchy, to put us under the thumb of a 12-month cycle that basically is out of alignment with everything in nature and the cycle of nature, that can include the womb, the sacred womb of women, and the blood moon, speaking of which, of women. And why this was important to remove it, to strip us of sensuality, of balance, of connection with nature, and so forth. So there are things, and the reason why we're going to need communities is that so that we can kind of reframe and undo, unwrap ourselves out of these weird cycles of oppression and toxicity by implementing new forms of loving rituals. When you look at some of the monoliths in Stonehenge and Eastern Island and the pyramids of Giza or other stone structures or so forth, you'll hear them saying, oh yeah, they built it in such a way so that when the first sunset of of spring solstice, here it is, and the sun aligns with this area, and it's just degrees of, it's insane. It's insane. So you had mathematicians, astronomers, architects, knowing the planets 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, building structures to align with the sun and the moon and the this and the that. For what? For the fuck of it? There was a reason for this. And we have forgotten everything. And we have then come into the Industrial Revolution. And we've come from, working 7 days a week to death, literally to death, to being grateful to having Sunday off. Can you imagine that bullshit? To being grateful to work, 5 days a week. For some of us who are lucky to work 5 days a week. And not 2 jobs or 3. And they've done that so that we are out of alignment with everything. And all that remains is despair and the incredible, voracious, hunger to consume shit that we don't need. Do you understand? Having 45 fucking handbags instead of our freedom. And I think our freedom in the new earth, the satisfaction of not paying to live, the satisfaction of being artisans again, artists. Do you realize that everyone 200-300 years ago was an artist? You were making sweaters, you were weaving blankets, you were making socks, you were making bread, you were painting portraits, you were painting murals, you were making rocking chairs, you were creating tables, you were building homes, you were creating gardens. We were artists. And so we were being fed by the things that we were creating and giving away or trading as musicians. I could go on and on and on as with every 100 years how we lost ourselves more and more. And so when you go back to remembering who you are as a starseed, you can't go back. You can't play small anymore. So, if you're interested in doing a starseed session with me, you can go on my website, on my profile page. But I can guarantee you that after a session, you can't play small at all. And that means that now you're responsible for what kind of life you're going to live for the rest of this life and the future incarnations that you can actually co-create based on the knowledge of your wisdom and your sovereignty to make the right decisions rather than being a leaf at the mercy of the wind, which is what we've been experiencing for probably a good 1,500 years. You and me. So, anyway, I'm going to go because I keep coughing and I need water. And so far, the visibility that TikTok has allowed, they kind of flagged it for 50 minutes. And I'm saying that to you because it's happening to all my lives. And I'm not complaining. I'm actually happy. And I'll tell you why. Because it shows me that I must be saying something right. Because they would not censor my visibility for 50 minutes of the maybe 1 hour I spoke to you. So whatever they're seeing, whatever they're hearing, whatever their AI system is hearing, that's been programmed to make sure that we don't remember ourselves, apparently you're hearing it and they don't want too many more people to hear it. So if you've forgotten some of the things I've said, go on YouTube, follow me there. And listen to this, and then tell your own stories. We need to become the great storytellers of the new age. We need to literally build the pathways, because the pathways have not yet been built. We are not going on treaded roads. We're going out into the jungles of our lost consciousness and creating a new world. Sending you much love on your journey. Namaste.